Hello, my name is Grian, and today I'm going to be building something a little more wacky than usual. I'm going to be making a house on a giant snail. Let's get right into it. I'm going to start by working on the end of the foot, which is probably the easiest part to start on. I'm going to make the body of the snail different to the shell, so it's going to be looking rather like a slug to begin with, but then we'll go and do the shell afterwards. I'm trying to get a good organic shape out of this, so it's going to take a little bit of time working with half slab and sandstone block. I chose this colour because it complements the shell later on, as you will see. But for now, I have to try and get as much of the shape right as possible. Although some of this will be covered up later, it's really important that I get the shape right. So I'm actually making it thicker as I go along the length of the foot or the body of the snail. And then when I get to where I want the head to be, I'm going to start edging it forward and upwards so that I start to make a shape of the head, and then later I can add things like tentacles. Now, I'm not very good at making organics. In fact, this is the first time I've ever attempted this build, so do bear with me. I have to edit this shape quite a lot, and that's okay with this kind of build. It's going to take a lot of trial and error to get exactly the shape you want, especially editing it with staircases and half slabs. But since this is symmetrical, and I've got the shape that I want on one half, I'm then just going to flip it over to save myself some time, and that will mainly complete the shape of the snail body. But first, I need to make sure everything on the body is absolutely perfect. Even the minor details will add to the shape before I flip it over and then have a complete shape. And then I take a step back, take a look at it, and decide maybe there needs to be a few more changes, and then done. Now that I'm fairly happy with the shape of my snail body and the foot, I then need to go and start the shell. This is all by eye, and I don't want a particularly perfect circle shape on this. I want a very realistic shape. So I'm going to be adding blocks, and at first I used clay, but I will actually change that later to stone. So right now I'm trying to get a really good 3D shape on half of it so that I can again copy paste it over, because it is a symmetrical build in this case. And it's fairly hard to explain what I'm doing because at the time I didn't really know what I was doing apart from like trying to get that perfect shape in, and I'm actually just editing the shape as I go along. I sort of laid out a very basic shell and then I constantly edit it. You may have also noticed that I put a half moon shape etched into the shell itself. That's to mimic an apex in a real shell, but I'm not too sure we're going to see it later, but we'll find out. So now I'm going to copy paste it over the other side and make sure that we have a good shell shape. I then turn the shell to stone so that it's easier to texture for me, and then using Voxel Sniper, edit it to the blocks that I want, using hardened clay, stained clay, and a bit of grass on the top mixed in with some stone. Now I'm going to add the tentacles. In a real snail, that's where its sort of feelers are, but on ours, it is going to be eyeballs. So I'm using fence block to mimic tentacles of a real snail, and then adding a custom head on the top to be little eyeballs. Quite cute. That's a fairly easy step, and now I need to move on to creating the actual house embedded in the shell. This is what defines it as a wacky build, because it's not just an organic, it's also a house, and way out of scale of what is normally considered a house. So I start off by creating a very small log outline, and then give it a little bit of a roof, and try and match it over to the other side so it looks like this house is sort of hanging over the top. I then decorate it with a few details, and then start hollowing out as much of the shell as I can without it being too much. I then decide to detail a little bit more and add a window. Fairly easy. Once I've done that and I've put as much detail into this small part of the build as possible, I then go to the right and create a small balcony because I want to utilise as much space as I can, but since it's a very thin build, I'm going to have to jut out a little bit more than just using the inside of the shell. I add a door on the side, and then turn around to the other side of the shell and start working on the other side, but I'm not going to completely replicate it. I'm going to do something different on the other side. Although I'm going to be building exactly the same style, and I'm going to be making like a smaller house on this side, it's not going to be exactly the same, because then each side of the build as I go on constantly has something different to offer. So I'm having an entrance to the snail itself lower down to the house. But now that I've set out where everything's going to go, I'm going to go and start detailing, adding the roof, and generally keep building exactly what I made on the other side, but with a slightly different style. You may have noticed I introduced a darker log, and that I decided to have a different shape of roof. It's also a bit higher up, so that if you looked at this build from either side of the snail, you'd see that I've utilised all of the Y coordinate. If they were exactly the same, it'd look wider at that point and look rather odd. So that's just something to consider if you were ever making one of these. So what I'm going to do now is finish off the rest of this little bit of the house with the roof and finalising any details to it. I need to make a few adjustments to my shell, and then I'm going to decorate it with overgrowth, meaning vines, leaves as vines, and one thing that I forgot, a chimney between the two houses just as a final touch. And then I'm going to add a bunch of grass, long grass, ferns, and a mixture of flowers so that it looks really overgrown and really cool. These little details really make a big difference in it, and once you've placed all of those, that's kind of it. We have a complete build. Again, organics really aren't my strong suit, but I even think that I did quite a good job on this, and I want to credit two people in particular from the Wingcraft build team that inspired this creation, Bad Seed and Sage. They built a couple of these and I thought I just have to make my own, and I'm hoping that you guys are gonna think the same when you see a build like this. Hey, I want to live in a giant snail. So anyway, thank you very much for watching. I hope that this has intrigued you. If you have any suggestions, as always, leave it in the comments below. I love taking suggestions and making videos on them. And likewise, if you want to see more wacky builds or strange things that you haven't seen built in Minecraft before, come up with something. I might consider it. Thank you very much for watching. Goodbye!